You were there. Describe what you saw. In a limited amount of time.
Probably the worst Ireland performance I've covered. Just so, I think I counted it. It's 117 days since they beat the All Blacks, and to fall that far so quickly is fascinating. Really, like to everyone's trying to understand what's gone wrong, and there's a couple of theories put out there in the papers today. But I think the only people who actually can explain it are in that camp, because they are there on a daily basis. And as it stands, no one has come up, with a clear and understandable way of explaining it. I mean, Joe Schmidt reached for a couple of excuses yesterday. He threw out the line, will be okay for the World Cup, which, his record is excellent, and he has earned the right to turn this around. But as Peter O'Reilly writes in the Sunday Times, this is the biggest challenge of his career. And then Neil Francis was the one that I was drawn to first this morning. I think he probably picks it apart in 1,000 words with very good clarity. Doesn't it's often said that the Irish rugby team get an easy ride in the press. I think today's papers would give a light to that. I think it's pretty relentlessly negative, and deservedly so, and I think it's calling it as it sees it. Neil Francis pointing out that Schmidt's team don't play catch-up rugby, so they found themselves behind within 90 seconds against England. There's 61 seconds yesterday, and they couldn't figure it out. They couldn't figure out a way of getting back. He talks about Sexton and Murray and how they're basically going to have to be rehabilitated at their provinces now because they're just playing so badly. I mean, has Johnny Sexton ever had a worse 30 minutes of rugby than that half an hour after half time? I mean, he almost felt like he should have been substituted for his own sanity, for want of a better, to just get him out of there. So look, there's so much to try and sift through because it was such a bad performance, and it's difficult to know where to start.
Yeah, just some of I'll pick out a couple of paragraphs here from Neil Francis, talking about the decision to have the roof open. This was a fundamental error of judgment by Schmidt. Bloody-mindedness and awkwardness are one thing, but ceding advantage to a team that have something tangible to chase was an enormous mistake. Another line, there was evidence of this, talking about how comfortable Wales were. There was evidence of this as the final whistle blew. Wales had run 110 metres with the ball all day. All they had to do was tackle and wait for the mistakes to come. And when Ireland tried to respond, not only did their skills break down under extraordinary pressure, they broke down because they could not play football in dreadful conditions. And one other line, Ireland have not become a bad team overnight, but they have become a mediocre team over the space of 3 months, and they will have to address that decline.
Yeah, just throw in this one here. The candles have been burning low in Joe Schmidt's cathedral recently. There have been no voluminous cannons of play, no invention, no surprises, no continuity, no wit or dazzle. And quite often, when his teams win, all of his players play well. And that's, we've come to expect so much from this team, and they have delivered very little of what we expect from them in recent weeks, and in particular yesterday in Cardiff. And the problem he has is that he's used 36 players, and that's been I've written about it and we've talked about it in here. How many of them have played well? Mm-hmm. How many of them have actually helped the World Cup chances? And in particular, the 7 untouchables, the 6 or 7 untouchables, the pillars of his team are all playing badly.
And that's actually one line that Peter O'Reilly has almost exactly here as well in the Sunday Times. Those of us who scribble about Irish rugby will spend time in the coming months trying to decide which players will fill the numbers on the edge of Schmidt's World Cup squad. But his biggest job now is trying to breed inspiration into so many of the players upon whom he's depended in recent years, players who have been made to look human over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah.
You guys will have much better knowledge of the workings of this team than I will, but is complacency an issue? Because I remember, I think it was in here that Brian O'Driscoll said that only one England player would get on the Irish team. And I don't know how players don't listen to that and wouldn't be affected by it. He's one of the best players in Irish rugby ever, more or less telling you that you're better than anyone in England. And I don't know how well the coach has kept complacency out of the team, because Sean Cronin is dropped from the squad altogether after poor performance against Italy. Yet Johnny Sexton and Conor Murray are played into form. Is that not hypocritical? Because
it's not consistent.
Yeah, okay.
Certainly not consistent. I think complacency was an issue sailing into the England game. I think they sailed into the England game full of belief that they were on the basis that they won so it's like 17 in the previous 18 and beaten the All Blacks and won the Grand Slam and won a series in Australia, which all feels like a long time ago now. And they were, I think England caught them unawares and they got a punch in the gut that day and they struggled to recover. I don't think complacency. They couldn't have been complacent based on their last 3 games.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe they felt like they were back after the France game and that they could just turn up and do it again against Wales. I don't know. But I think it certainly was an issue. It was striking that time. But on Saturday, I did this mano a mano thing, list the 2 teams beside each other, gave them 10.
Yeah.
And genuinely, almost every Irish player is better on paper than the Welsh player they're up against. Pretty much every player. Like, these are players that don't do well for the region. It's the typical Welsh thing. They come together. Gatland, Sean Edwards mould them together into an unbelievable unit. And they're not a particularly exciting team to watch. They're not a particularly entertaining team to watch. But they work hard for each other and they took their chances well and they were clever, and Ireland they just kind of put pressure on Ireland and Ireland didn't respond well to that pressure. So I think you're right. I think it was an issue at the start, but I don't know how they could be complacent after that, what happened against England.
I know the likes of the rugby media sometimes get a hard time for being too soft. Honestly, the most optimistic line I found in the papers this morning was Bernard Jackman saying, the post-mortem from this defeat will hurt, but the patient isn't dead, it just needs a reboot. And contrast that to Eamon Sweeney kind of puts the boot in the Sunday window
very
as well.
much so.
So this zings off the page. Pathetic, pitiful, practically pointless. This is one of the worst performances by an Irish team since the return to international respectability in the early noughties. Talks about delusions of progress, and then there's a little dig in there. It's like, this game meant so much to Welsh rugby. It's hard to begrudge victory to a country where rugby really is the people's game.
Yeah, I found looking through the papers as well that the coverage from, I suppose, the UK media, like a couple of the Sunday Times writers like Stephen Jones, were probably a little bit more favourable to Ireland than they probably are here. Like even straight off the player ratings is what I noticed. I'm looking here in the Sunday Independent.
Disappointed.
I see a lot of 4s. I see a lot of 5s, 6s at best. Sean O'Brien, there appears to be a 54 beside him. That might have been a
54 is a good rating.
Could have been either 5 or 4.
They're all out of
Probably
100.
wasn't 54. But I look at the Sunday Times of Stephen Jones. Like, for example, Cian Healy here is given a 4. Stephen Jones actually gave him an 8 yesterday.
Yeah, generous. Probably one of the players who tried hardest to kind of get things going, but probably overtried and gave away a couple of penalties. I think in defence of Stephen Jones, he was doing both teams on the whistle, which is a difficult thing to do, but not to make excuses for him. I wouldn't agree with that rating personally. I think Des Berry's probably more on the money, but again, he's probably, I very much watch these games through the prism of covering Ireland, and I'm keeping an eye very much on the Irish team. So I mean, I read the Welsh papers or the Welsh versions of Sunday Times on the way home, and I mean, it's Alan Wynne-Jones. If he ever wants to boost his ego, he should just keep these papers and go back to them, because he is the man in Wales right now. Gatland was asked, is he the best player they've ever had, and that's a pretty long list, and he wasn't disagreeing, but yeah, he was the main focus of it all. So I think there's probably a little bit of that you're trying to rate 30 players, you're kind of you're going to miss 1 or 2.
Yeah, I did find it ever so slightly therapeutic reading the Sunday Times kind of match report and reaction, and with Stephen Jones, it was 90% Wales were fantastic, what an achievement, and you're kind of, for a few seconds it allowed you to forget maybe how poor Ireland were yesterday.
Yeah, and Schmidt argued that going for a Grand Slam gives you about 5%. Now I don't know where he plucked the figure from, but gives you about 5% more motivation, that you've got something really tangible that you're going for, and there's probably something in that. But at the same time, I was in here, having a row with you, McKenna, a couple months ago, and we were comparing Ireland to the All Blacks, and the All Blacks don't dip. They've dipped the odd time, but they don't dip the way Ireland dipped in this championship, and that's the worrying point, because they got to that standard and they haven't been able to stay there. And maybe Steve Hansen was right. Maybe the pressure has gotten to them.
All about waiting in the long grass.
Well, yeah, we go back to being the underdog. We're back to Ireland are back to third in the world.
This is actually the grand plan.
Yeah,
go back to the underdog.
I'd say by Wednesday we'll get to that level. The different stages of grief. But right now it's fairly hard to be optimistic of what's going to happen in Japan.
Before we move on from the rugby, there was one piece Brendan Fanning had today in the Sunday Independent, and it was, I suppose, just maybe kind of a comparison of Joe Schmidt and Warren Gatland, both of whom were having their last Six Nations games for their respective countries, and just going through the path they kind of travelled to get to where they are now. I thought it was enjoyable read. There's a nice line here about Warren Gatland when he would have come through with Ireland, his first game against France. France were blessed to survive on an 18-16 scoreline. Our predictions had entertained a gap of 50. By this stage in his career, Warren Gatland knew he had found his true calling. He was good with the players and good with the media. Not only would he give quality off-the-record briefings, but if the info was delivered in a lounge bar, he knew where his wallet was, a unique occurrence in our relationship with the Kiwis at the time.
Yeah, Brendan benefits from his longevity here. Like it's a really, like, his, you know, having been at the coalface for throughout these eras, he's written the best book about Irish rugby that I've ever read. From there to here, it's brilliant. I'd recommend anyone to go and find it, and it just tells the story of how Ireland went from that shambles to of amateurism, and you know the crossovers revisited here. You know, Gatland's inability to manage the Blazers, into the kind of uber professional Schmidt era, and the kind of the contrast between the two. It's a very, there's a lot of stuff in there that I would have known, but at the same time, when it's laid out and told this well, it's just a very, very good read. You know, a lot of people have done the Gatland-Schmidt thing this week, but this is a kind of a different way of looking at it.
No, it's terrific.
I did like one line as well towards the end then. For Gatland, beating Ireland or Irish provinces when he was at Wasps has been like bumping into an old school teacher who said you'd never amount to anything when in fact you'd conquered a whole hill of beans. He holds on to his Ireland coaching experience as a discomfort blanket.
Is he just underrated in Ireland, or is he underrated worldwide?
I don't know.
I think he's terribly underrated in Ireland.
I think people have...
There's a grudge, there is a lingering grudge, because
The O'Driscoll
he's
stuff.
fond of a little swipe here or there, an old jibe in the media, and there is the...
He dropped Brian O'Driscoll.
He dropped Brian O'Driscoll in the Lions. But when you look at what he's achieved...
I wonder if he's actually underrated now. I think people probably have a grudging respect. It's, you know, I think he's seen as being this, he's always painted as this manager figure that, you know, others are the tactical brains behind it, and that, you know, other coaches are cleverer than him. But this is the third time Joe Schmidt's gone to Cardiff in a Six Nations game. It's the third time he's lost. It was, you know, it was the worst of the three, but they've always been able to find the holes that other team haven't. I mean, Gatland's record speaks for itself, but you know, talk to Sean O'Brien about him. He'll say, you know, he left a series in New Zealand behind him. There's always some criticism, whether it's his methods or his manner. He seems to rub some people up the wrong way. But I mean, when he does finish after the World Cup, regardless of what happens there, his achievements are outstanding. There's Brendan goes back when he's talking about Schmidt. Goes back to that training session in Harlequins that Luke Farrell's talked about when Ireland in the 2015 World Cup trained against them before the Romania game, and Fitzgerald ran a line, thought it was the right thing to do, and got rinsed in front of everyone. And funny, Adam Jones was in town this week, and he was saying he's never seen a coach behave the way Schmidt did that day in terms of running the plays. Every play was micromanaged.
In a good way or a bad way?
He didn't say whether it was good or bad, but when you watch what happened yesterday and the players' inability to react to what happens on the pitch when things go against them, it all feeds into what, you know, the questions that we're answering now. Is like when everything's going well, that kind of management is great. When it's going against you, are the players autonomous enough to turn things around? This is, as Peter says, or already says, the biggest challenge of his career. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how he responds to it and tries to turn things around.
I even found, obviously I'm not on the beat, so I've never really had any contact with Schmidt, but I'm kind of very interested in how he was even responding in the media yesterday. Like, Peter O'Reilly uses the phrase, we've never seen him so human, because he's looking for, maybe not excuses, but ways of explaining it, I guess. But the line about, like, don't give up on this team, I hope the genuine fan doesn't give up on the team, I don't really know what that means. Like, what's a genuine fan? And Shane Horgan questioned it actually on Virgin Media yesterday, said, well, the genuine fan, like, is that just like an unthinking cheerleader, or like maybe the genuine fan is a little bit more critical? So I can't explain that. I just found that a very curious thing to say.
I'd say it probably stems back a bit from the amount of empty seats that were there towards the end of the England game at the start of the tournament.
Maybe.
Yeah, and criticism is always graded with him. I mean, I think he buys into the kind of team of us stuff. I think he expects the media and the pundits to be all an extension of the team a little bit, and then that doesn't happen, and I think that leaves him a little bit miffed. So I think that may be a little bit of a dig at the inevitable criticism that will come in today's papers, tomorrow's papers, in the studio for the rest of the week, across the country. And I mean, this is only a microcosm of what's happening, because my Twitter mentions were fairly toxic last night. So you know, it's people are annoyed. So yeah, like I think they have done enough for people to stick with them to a degree. He's there till the World Cup no matter what. Yeah. His replacement is sitting there beside him. So, like, you know, this is the ticket. It's not going to change. There's no even though there was a few calls for heads when people were going home from the nightclubs and stuff last night. You know, these are the men who are tasked with turning things around. So I guess he just wants people to stick with him.